Good morning, Unitarian Universalists in Hendersonville, North Carolina, Athens, Ohio, and those of you who have just tuned in to visit us. If we haven't met or this is your first service with us, my name is Don Rollins. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm the contract minister with the folks in Athens and accredited interim minister with our congregation here in Hendersonville. Today marks the first time both congregations are offered the option of joining us live. That is a daunting reality for me, but with your patience, your sense of humor, we'll be fine. Plus now I get to see some of your faces. One more commercial. If you'd like to know more about the Hendersonville Fellowship, visit us at uufhnc.org. That's uufhnc.org. For the Athens congregation, the address is uuathensoh.org, uuathensoh.org. And finally, if you'd like to check out the greater denomination, go to uua.org, uua.org. If you're with us today but not familiar with our tradition, we hope this small sample of our liberal religious tradition will give you a sense of who we are and what we most value. But just to make sure, our forebears came to these shores in the late 1700s with three primary values that bound them together and carry on to today. That is the free and responsible search for truth, the beloved community that love and challenge us, and a commitment to justice for our siblings on this earth and the earth itself. One last announcement having to do with today's service. While we plan to offer after-service breakout groups for both congregations at some point, the timing is such that today we can only do that with the Hendersonville folks. So we'll stop recording the service after the closing words, and the Hendersonville viewers will randomly be assigned to groups of 6, which my able assistant will take care of. I'll give you the discussion topic, and all who'd like to share your responses, feel free to go ahead. Apologies to the Athens members and friends for this week. Welcome and announcements are complete. So let this time together bring us to ground. Maybe soothe our souls, prod us to think, and get us ready for the week ahead. As I often remind folks in Hendersonville, we will never have these exact moments again. So let's show up. Let's be ready to give and receive the love that binds. We light this morning's chalice, symbol of our religious tradition, with this reminder from retired UU minister Dick Gilbert. He tells us loneliness is our common fate, and there is no escape. But out of that loneliness comes our salvation, for we love out of our fear of being alone. And as long as human beings people this earth, we can be assured that in our loneliness, there is also love waiting to be tapped to water the barren brown lawn of our loneliness. Love which shrivels if it's kept to the self, which flourishes only if it is given away. So I need you, you need me. I know it, you know it. What are we waiting for?
Good morning. I'd like to share with you a story today about how to make a difference. It doesn't matter how old you are or how able you are. This story started in 1997 with a little boy who was 6 years old, and he lived in Canada, and his name was Ryan. And Ryan heard a story in school about how women in Africa would sometimes have to walk 5 miles, 10 miles, 20 miles, carrying heavy jugs of water just so they would have something to drink. And he went home and he looked at his mom and he looked at her getting water out of the sink And he thought, well, that's just wrong. Now, keep in mind, this is a 6-year-old boy. 6-year-old boys are very in touch with the earth, as you know, usually by digging ground worms out and playing in the mud and all of that fun kind of stuff. But Ryan wanted to do something different. He wanted to make a difference for those women who were like his mom. And so he started doing chores around the house at first. And over 3 months, he raised about $70. And he thought, well, that's pretty good. And then he went back to his teacher at school and he said, well, I've got $70. Can I build a well in Africa? And she said, well, Ryan, I think it costs a little more than that. So she looked into it and found out it was about $2,000 at that point to build a well in Africa. And so he didn't say, oh my goodness, $2,000, there's no way that I can do that. Instead, he went home and he said, Mom, we're gonna need more money. And so he started doing fundraisers in the community. And in 12 months' time, he had raised the $2,000 to build a well in Africa. And they sent it to an organization who was doing that very thing. And he got his well built, which was an amazing thing. He was 7, almost 8 at that time. And that would have been a great thing if he just stopped right there. But he didn't. He said, you know what? We built one well. What do we need to do to build more wells? And so when he was 10, keep in mind, 10 years old, he started a foundation called Ryan's Wells. And he did fundraising. He went and talked to organizations. And to date, they have raised $892,000, or excuse me, they have built wells that service 892,700 people in Africa. This all came from a boy who just wanted to make a difference. And how he was able to do it was that he didn't think, I can't do that. He thought, how do we get that done? Now, some of that comes from just being naive and being a child. But why can't we all tap into that? That inner child in us that says, well, I can do that. How do I get it done? In celebration of Earth Day, I want us to think about what we can all do and how we can get it done together. We can all make a difference in our homes. We can all pull together and make a difference, just like we're doing with the Corona-19 virus, COVID-19. We can pull together and we can make a real sustained difference. And it doesn't have to, you don't have to think, oh, well, I'm just one person. Because Ryan was just one person. And he made a difference and continues to make a difference today. So let's think about how we can all make that difference in our lives and together in our communities. Thank you.
Hey again, folks. We save this space for the deep transitions in our lives. It's a time to share from the heart, a tender time made sacred by things that matter most to us. For the folks in Hendersonville, stones and water are used to signify those transitions. In Athens, it's candle and fire. So we can protect one another's privacy. The Hendersonville folks have the option to share offline after the service. For the Athenians, be sure to monitor the announcements for a midweek Zoom call for your joys and sorrows. I've kept a modified version of that ritual to recognize those things that we share across the miles and congregations. In that spirit, I'll place a stone in the bowl to signify our shared thoughts and feelings. Before we do that, I want to read you and maybe ask you to read with me. These are the words that Athens used. Together, ours is a welcoming community where we find connection, a spiritual community where we find meaning, and ours is a sharing community where our joys are amplified, a caring community where our sorrows are lessened. So we take this moment to reflect on our joys and sorrows and acknowledge the mutual support of our community. And when they finish in Athens, they sing a simple song that includes the words that you see at the bottom of the page. We are sending you light to heal you, to hold you, We are sending you light to hold you in love. Once again, I'll place a stone in the bowl to signify our shared thoughts and values. Let this stone speak for our pain, for ours and others. Let this stone speak for the humor that sustains us even now. Let this stone speak for those who are without privilege and who are right now suffering most. Let this stone speak for those who are sick, those who are dying, and the 162,000 at least souls we've lost from the face of the earth because of this virus. Let this stone speak for the earth and for the sky and for all nature's bounty. Even as we take this time away from our busy lives, most of us at least, it's as though we see the sky and the earth for the first time. Let this stone speak for those in both congregations whose time here is short, those whose journey will soon end. Let this stone speak for all of you who are visiting with us. May you find amongst us a caravan that's a caravan without despair.
I want to watch him. He's there.
Hi again, folks. We had a small glitch, so I'd like to share that last part with you. Let this stone speak for all of you who are visiting with us even now. May you find here a caravan with no despair. Welcome back. Today's meditation comes in two parts. Mary and I will read them responsibly. You know, it's not always easy to lean into meditation online, but unless you're driving, eating brunch, or reading the New York Times on a split screen, try relaxing your body. Try closing your eyes. Try noticing your breath. If you're not a meditator, this is not a pop quiz. It's an invitation to hold and be held in love. So we're going to begin with silence. Then Mary and I will offer a prayer to the earth given to us from the Ute Nation. And finally, I'd like for you to choose a place on earth. Conjure up in your mind and heart a place on earth that you consider a holy place, a place that feeds your soul, be it now or in memory. So share with us in this time of silence, and then we'll read. But the whole time, feel free to conjure up that place. From the Ute Nation. Earth, teach me stillness as the grasses are stilled with light.
Earth, teach me suffering as old stones suffer in memory.
Earth, teach me caring as parents who secure their young.
Earth, teach me courage as the tree which stands all alone.
Earth, teach me limitation as the ant which crawls on the ground.
Earth, teach me freedom as the eagle which soars in the sky.
Earth, teach me resignation as the leaves which die in the fall.
Earth, teach me regeneration as the seed which rises in the spring.
And earth, teach me to forget myself as melted snow forgets its life.
Earth, teach me to remember kindness as dry fields weep with rain.
Like many people who take Earth Day to heart, I'm never quite sure what to do with April 22nd. Even as we mark the 50th anniversary of what is surely a holy day. Will I rejoice in that baby rabbit foraging outside my window? Or will I despair over a doomsday clock that is only temporarily slowed as a consequence of the pandemic? Do I celebrate the holy mystery all around as I ride my bike up and down these mountains? Or do I think about the hydraulic fracking pumps that more and more dot the fields of my native southeastern Ohio? I was a latecomer to this bittersweet holy day. I grew up playing on a sprawling former surface mine, bathed in water from the rusty downhill wells that clogged the narrow water lines to our house trailer. And it wasn't until seminary I began to think of the earth as the fragile manifestation of God, of life. Tutored in biblical scholarship, Jungian-style Christianity, the notion of Eden and innocence lost took on a very different meaning. It was telling us that we were given paradise and that we are spoiling it as fast as we can. I learned that Gaylord Nelson and John McConnell and Dennis Hayes were the faces behind Earth Day. Raised in the shadow of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, living in the milieu of the Cold War in Vietnam, they envisioned a day set aside to celebrate the Earth. I learned that vision became a reality on March 21st, 1970, when the city of San Francisco, named of course for St. Francis, the patron saint of ecology, proclaimed the first Earth Day. McConnell was eventually able to persuade then UU Secretary General U Thant to support a global celebration to be observed on the first day of the March equinox in the Northern Hemisphere. I learned that 1 year later, the UN celebration included the ringing of the peace bell, which was made from coins given by Japanese school children, signifying their respect for the earth. Following the bell, people of all nations were asked to observe a few moments of silence on behalf of the environment. I learned that in 1972, then UN Secretary General Kurt Waldheim rang the peace bell as part of a 12-hour television broadcast. I learned that in 1975, the US Congress passed a resolution proclaiming the national observance of Earth Day in this country. I learned that in 1994, the peace bell was rung by two children, one Palestinian, the other Israeli. And in 1998, a Russian cosmonaut rang the bell from Moscow. Back to seminary as I'm learning all this stuff. About halfway through, I found a job at the Unitarian Universalist Church in the area. I learned how to march. They taught me how to speak to elected officials. They taught me how to organize musical events for what we then called ecology. And there I was given new language to describe Eden, the interdependent web of all existence, where folks tried to model environmental sensitivity and responsibility. So that congregation started to use green-only products, even though they cost more. I learned about the simple stuff. Shop cars for mileage ratings, not features. Vote for green, small or large G, candidates. Convert church investments to green funds. Eat vegetarian, if not quite vegan. In short, I was being schooled in how to protect life, UU style. But despite all of his learning, it only got real when I placed it in the context of a body of water that had been my friend since I was 6 years old. Somebody at the church had already introduced me to fellow Appalachian author and poet Wendell Berry. Berry could have been describing my own relationship with the lake. Because Berry was telling me that environmentalism isn't real until humans adopt or adopted by a particular place. That we can and ought to carry somewhere deep in our consciousness a sacred patch of earth, a body of water, a garden, prairie, mountain, desert. He was telling us that unless we locate that awareness in a beloved space, we worship nature from afar. And Berry counsels us to find and invoke such spaces and hold dear to them in times just like these. Back to that body of water. Jackson Lake covers a mere 242 acres just outside the village of Oak Hill, Ohio, where I spent most of my childhood and all of my adolescence. The lake was once but the confluence of 3 springs, deep in what was then home to the Mingo, the Delaware, and the Shawnee. And Jackson Lake was dug in the heart of Appalachian counties that comprise some 70% of Ohio's woodlands, and enlarged in 1938 when Franklin Roosevelt's Civilian Conservation Corps installed a concrete spillway, causing the water to swell to its current dimensions. And I have lived in 2 different homes near Jackson Lake, one as a kid, the other as an adult. But that's not the only reason I mention that relatively unknown body of water in a relatively secluded section of the state. Because for me, Earth Day begins and ends with Jackson Lake. It's a place where the interdependence of humans and animals and trees and water is made manifest. It's just the kind of place that Berry and the pioneers of Earth Day had in mind. Jackson Lake is the place where I first saw tadpoles and bluegills and bass. It's where Scott Pastor, Dean Roof, and I taught ourselves how to fish. It's where, as a Boy Scout, I camped, learned to canoe, I learned to cuss and chew tobacco, and take part in moss battles in the spillway. All that's true, by the way. Jackson Lake was where I courted my first, mostly ambivalent, official girlfriend. I'm not using her name, she'll appreciate it. And Jackson Lake was also where I learned to swim on my own. I learned to float and then dog paddle and then swim freestyle. I never told my parents that I actually swam when I'd take my half-mile jaunts down the gravel road to the lake. Not so much out of concern that they'd forbid me from swimming alone, which they certainly would, but because of some strange sense that telling somebody about that lake and me would be a betrayal of something secretive, something special between that lake and me. Over time, I began swimming further and further across the lake with but one goal in mind: make it to the other side. It wasn't that Jackson Lake was some foe to be conquered. It was a friend to be known better, a respite for an introverted, tall, gangly kid adopted by an extroverted, short and stocky family. And so for 2 or 3 secret years, I braved the cold waters of early May, venturing 1/3 of the way across the lake's surface, preparing for the day I might make it to the other side. I eventually crossed what I guessed was the halfway point with enough energy to push on, and yet I lacked the confidence to go all the way. And that was lesson 1 from Jackson Lake. It was one of those swelteringly hot and humid southern Ohio days, the first time I swam all the way across Jackson Lake. Seemed like a lifetime to get there, but I did. And exhausted, I hit the beach with some sort of runner's high. I felt exhilarated, proud, alive, so this was the other shore. After resting under some silver maples, it occurred to me that my plan had worked, save for one major flaw. I had not put much thought into how I might get home once I was tired. The walk home was around 5 miles, and that's barefoot and probably uphill. I could try hitching a ride, but what were the odds when you're trying to thumb down a farmer while wearing nothing but a pair of cut-off jeans? Believing then, as now, that any God that exists must have a soft spot for the ignorant, I prayed for the strength to make it back to my side of the lake. The distance seemed farther and farther, and the water strangely colder. But the swim back was without incident. I made it. Life was good. God was a sport. And that was lesson number 2. I regularly repeated that swim thereafter, even as an adult, when returning home on occasional summer visits. I would find time to steal away to the lake and swim to the other side and back. It was a powerful bond, and a bond that continues to this day. Then I moved back to the hills for the fall of 1997 until the summer of 2002. I was the self-appointed chief volunteer caretaker of another corner of the lake. I cleared the brush without polluting power tools, and it's brush that blocked the path to that narrow peninsula known simply as the Point. The Point's a special place. I once married a young couple out there. And each spring, I would break trails to the mouth of Jefferson Furnace, a stone iron mold perched on the lakeshore where plating for the USS Monitor was forged. I collected the trash and the bottles and the cans strewn from the picnic area to the spillway, and I maintained several trails to the best fishing spots. And here's the part I want you to hear, folks. That lake was my church. It was my church. I would not let my corner of my church be defiled. Now, when I visit family there, I cycle the back roads that lead to my old friend. And when I stop by the point or the beach or the spillway, I am most aware of my place in the interdependent web. I'm a small but grateful particle of an ecosystem that is more like a temple than a lake. The leaping bass, the waterfowl, the beavers, the deer, the hawks, the raccoons, even the skunk or two that have visited a campfire, these are my siblings as surely as my human families. So there's my story. So what about you? What about the place that came to mind when I asked you to visualize your Eden? And maybe you hike the Appalachian Trail every year, or maybe your health has shrunken your world to the plant in the corner or the view out the window. Maybe it's the dog or the cat or the hamster or a boa constrictor. I don't care. What's important is that your efforts for environmentalism and environmental justice, they are grounded in some tangible way, that you feel with certainty and with grace bestowed the very breath of life you share with all living things. So look here, if you're of two minds this Earth Day, you are certainly not alone. Given a president hell-bent on rolling back hard-won regulations, there's plenty of despair to go around. But I ask you, don't let that noise distract you from the untamed within, calling to the untamed without. Take time to notice the sunsets, the phases of the moon. See those green shoots, that wildflower risking a late frost, and that wacky mourning dove singing just for you. So even in this era of confinement, join anew in the sacraments of life unto love, and thus claim your joyful, your rightful place in the interdependent web of which we are all a part. And we're back. Like some of you, I was saddened to hear songwriter, singer John Prine died early this month. He had long been in bad health. He was a victim of the COVID virus. But Prine left behind a rich library of original songs, songs about despair, songs about earlier generations of family and their times, and yes, silly songs like Dear Abby, Please Don't Bury Me, and The Bottomless Lake. And although Prine was raised in the Chicago area, he also spent a lot of time with family in Kentucky where his father was raised. But over time, the area fell victim to the coal and timber industries, leaving the town of Paradise, that's the right name, Paradise, stripped of its character, stripped of its economy. Our closing song is the studio version of Paradise that Prine wrote for his father. And I invite you to listen to the expression of solidarity with a particular place and the grief that washes over when that place is defiled. Please find the video on our YouTube channel, Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Henderson, under Virtual Worship Service playlist. Copyright laws prevent us from sharing this recorded version of our virtual worship. So you're going to see the video, it just won't be recorded. I hope Prine's words spoke to you. Once again, it's about loving a particular place. Thanks so much for spending time with us. Really enjoy doing live, believe it or not, and I hope that you're good with some of the pauses. It's just a little bit cleaner when we do it that way. So with all that said, let's close with these words from Unitarian Universalist Eric Williams. The world is too beautiful to be praised by only one voice. May you have the courage to sing your part. This world is too broken to be healed by only one set of hands. May you have the courage to use your gifts. Finally, may you go in peace.